Hare Krishna, dear devotees, please accept our humble obeisances. All glories to Jagat Guru, Srila Prabhupada. All glories to our revered speaker for today, His Grace SALIKA Prabhu. And all glories to the Sangha, the Vaishnavi devotees. Devotees, we thank you for being here. Today is Wednesday, the 5th day of the second month of 2025. And we have SALIKA Prabhu, who is going to be speaking to us from the Srimad Bhagavatam. So, like we always say, SALIKA Prabhu needs no introduction, and we're very grateful for rendering this service. SALIKA Prabhu, we may put the verse on the screen, and then you take it over from here. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Hare Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Om Namo Bhagavati Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavati Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavati Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavati Vasudevaya. Narayana Namaskritam Naraichaivam Narottamam Devi Sarasvati Vyasam Tatujayam Udiraye Nasta Praishu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavatam Sevaya Bhagavati Uttamasloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishchike. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto this personality of Godhead Narayan. Unto Narayan Rishi, the supreme human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author of the Srimad Bhagavatam. By regular attendance in classes on this Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotees, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed. And loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. So today we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd Canto. We're reading chapter 5, text number 51, the last verse in that chapter. She's titled Vidura's Talk with Maitreya. So we recite the Sanskrit text. Tato vayamat pramukaya date babu vimatmam karavam makinte Twamna swak chakshu paridevi saktya deva kriyate yad anugrahanaham Tato vayamat pramukaya date babu vimatma karavama kinte Twamna swak chakshu paridei saktya Deve kriyate yad anugrahanam Tato vayamat pramukya yadate Babo vimatma karavama kinte Twamna swachakshu paridei saktya Deva kriyate yad anugrahanam. Word for word translation. Tataha, therefore. Vayam, all of us. Mat, pramukaha, coming from the total cosmos, the Mahatattva. Yat altehe, for the purpose of which Babu Vima created. Atmaha, O Supreme Self. Karavamaha shall do, Kim, what? Te, your service. Twam, yourself. Na, to us. Swachakshuhu, personal plan. He specifically grant us Satya with potency to work. Deva, O Lord, Kriya are they for acting, yet from wish, Anugrahanam of those who are specifically favored. Translation and purport by Divine Grace, by Charana Ravindra Bhaktivedanta Swami Jagaguru Srila Prabhupada. O Supreme Self, please give us, who are created in the beginning from the Mahatattva, the total cosmic energy, your kind directions on how we shall act. Kindly award us your perfect knowledge and potency so that we can render you service in the different departments of subsequent creation. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. The Lord creates this material world and impregnates the material energy with the living entities who will act in the material world. All these actions have a divine plan behind them. The plan is to give the conditioned souls who so desire it a chance to enjoy sense gratification. But there is another plan behind the creation, to help the living entities realize that they are created for the transcendental sense gratification of the Lord and not for their individual sense gratification. This is the constitutional position of the living entities. The Lord is one without a second, and He expands Himself into many for His transcendental pleasure. All the expansions, the Vishnu Tattvas, the Jiva Tattvas, and the Sakti Tattvas, the personality of Godhead, the living entities and the different potencies are different offshoots from the same one Supreme Lord. The Jiva Tattvas are separated expansions of the Vishnu Tattvas. And although the Jivas have different potencies, they are all meant for the transcendental sense gratification of the Lord. Some of the Jivas, however, wanted to lord it over material nature in imitation of the lordship of the personality of Godhead. Regarding when and why such propensities overcame the pure living entities, it can only be explained that the Jiva Tattvas have infinitesimal independence, and that due to misuse of this independence, some of the living entities have become implicated in the conditions of cosmic creation, and are therefore called Nitya Bhadas, or eternally conditioned souls. The expansions of Vedic wisdom also gives the Nitya Bhadas, the conditioned living entities, a chance to improve. And those who take advantage of such transcendental knowledge gradually regain their lost consciousness of regard, rendering transcendental loving service to the Lord. The demigods are amongst the conditioned souls who have developed this pure consciousness of service to the Lord, but who at the same time continue to desire to lord it over the material energy. Such mixed consciousness puts a conditioned soul in the position of managing the affairs of this creation. The demigods are entrusted leaders of the conditioned souls, as some of the old prisoners in government jails are entrusted with some responsible work of prison management. So the demigods are improved conditioned souls, acting as representatives of the Lord in the material creation. Such demigods are devotees of the Lord in the material world. And when completely free from all material desires to lord it over the material energy, they become pure devotees and have no desire but to serve the Lord. Therefore, any living entity who desires a position in the material world may desire so in the service of the Lord, and may seek power and intelligence from the Lord, as exemplified by the demigods in this particular verse. One cannot do anything unless he is enlightened and empowered by the Lord. The Lord says in Bhagavad Gita 15:15, Mata smriti gyanam apo anam chaha. All recollections, knowledge, etc., as well as all forgetfulness, as engineered by the Lord, who is sitting within the heart of everyone. The intelligent man seeks the help of the Lord, and the Lord helps the sincere devotees in engage in his multifarious services. The demigods are entrusted by the Lord to create different species of living entities according to their past deeds. They are herein asked the favor of the Lord for the intelligence and power to carry out their task. Similarly, any conditioned soul may also engage in the service of the Lord under the guidance of an expert spiritual master, and thus gradually become freed from the entanglement of material existence. The spiritual master is the manifested representative of the Lord, and anyone who puts himself under the guidance of a spiritual master and acts accordingly is said to be acting in terms of Buddhi Yoga. As explained in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, text number 41. Vyavasayatmaka Buddhi Eka Kurunandana Bhausaka Yatmantascha Buddhayo Vyavasayinam. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purport of the third canto, 5th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Vidura's Talk with Maitreya. Hare Krishna. Umagyanam Timirandasya Gyanam Gyanam Shalakaya Shaksho Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Nama Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadipadam Bandiham Sri Guru Sri Yuta Pada Kamalam Sri Guru Vaishnavam Chaha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Ragunatam Tam Sam Sajivam Sadvitam Savadutam Parijanam Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahaganam Lalita Sri Vishakavishanta He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagapati Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gorangira Devindavaneshwari Brishabhanu Shuse Devi Pranamami Naripriye Mokam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Lagayate Girim Yakripa Tamaham Vande Sri Guru Dinatarinam Vancha Karpata Rubhyascha Kripa Sindubhyas Ivascha Patitanam Pavashnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ramo Ramo Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ramo Ramo Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ramo Ramo Hare Hare. O Supreme Self, please give us, who are created in the beginning from the matter to the total cosmic energy, your kind directions on how we shall act. Kindly award us your perfect knowledge and potency so that we can render service. We can render you service in the different departments of subsequent creation. Hare Krishna. So we welcome all of the devotees to this auspicious moment of the day, where we all have to come together to meditate, to hear, to talk, to discuss about the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which is the conclusion of the verse we're reading today. Lord Krishna told Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, Machita pranam bundiyasta parasparam kantayascha mannetyam tichianti cha ramanti cha. Krishna is describing the activities of the particular set of kind of living beings. So before going into this topic today, I want to offer respectful grievances unto all of the Vaishnavas who are gathered on this platform and all of those who are hearing from different channels. We pray that by the good mercy of Guru and Krishna, we'll be able to speak that which will be purifying to ourselves and pleasing to the devotees for the ultimate pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When I read this verse this afternoon on my way coming to my location, we are in the first week of February, and the first week of February every year is considered to be the international, by the United Nations, as the International Interfaith Harmony Week, where United Nations tries to bring all different people of different faiths together to talk, to discuss, to share about how faith is the foundation and basis of everything that exists, and how it can help the world attain the most desired peace. So when I was coming, I was invited by one of the state governors in the northwest of Nigeria to a peace talk. So I was coming in a vehicle, and I was trying to read this verse that we're going to be discussing today. And something happened that actually puts me in a very, very laughable situation, which is the exact message Srila Prabhupada is trying to share with us. Actually, when I read the whole of the purport of this text, I was thinking maybe after reading the purport, we'll just go into question and answers, because Srila Prabhupada has extensively preached. Srila Prabhupada has a very unique way of summarizing most complicated, complex subject matter in a simple word. And what Srila Prabhupada has done in this text is bring the whole of the Vedic scriptures, the whole of the Vedic thoughts into the purport of one text, of one chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam. From the beginning, from what constitutes the beginning, what constitutes the middle or the present, and what is the future. Srila Prabhupada gave us what is the conclusion of the whole of the process of devotion or service. So I was in the public vehicle, and we were three of us sitting in the vehicle, and we were coming, and we got to a checkpoint. And when we got to that checkpoint, there was a police officer who was very agitated. He was carried away by the power that was already invested upon him as a military personnel. Of course, for most of us who are not in Nigeria, Nigeria is a semi-war zone, even though we are not globally seen as a war country. But it's a war zone because there is no place in Nigeria where you can move freely without the presence of the military. So the military are always aware, and this is the succor for those who travel. So this particular officer, who is just a corporal in the Nigerian Navy, It was by the roadside passing vehicle. So he stopped our vehicle. And then next to me is a gentleman, and the person after that is one young man who was wearing a tracksuit, just like a sportsman. And until that moment, none of us knew the identity of this man. But I was so suspicious when I saw him when we got to the park. And the police officer said, "Hey, you," because apparently this young man was fiddling with his phone. So he asked him, "Give me the phone in your hand." So the guy went down and was stretching his hand. He said, "I said, give me that phone." And the guy said, "Why should I give you my phone?" He said, "Who are you to ask me question?" And the young man answered, he said, "You're speaking to Lieutenant Colonel." He mentioned his name. He said, "Where is your identity?" So the young man, he dipped his hand into his pocket and he brought out an ID card showing he's a lieutenant colonel in the military. And when he saw it, out of ego, he was so defeated. He was so embarrassed because all of the passengers in the now were looking at him. And instead of assuming and ascertaining, taking his original position of a low-ranking officer, he decided to bang the door on the lieutenant colonel. So the lieutenant colonel told the driver, "Wait." And he said, "Open the vehicle." He opened the door. He said, "Why did you bang the door in that manner?" He said, "You asked me to identify myself." I did. "And what were you supposed to be doing?" And the officer said, "What am I supposed to be doing?" He was asking back the same question. He said, "You are trained and you know what you're supposed to be doing. You've asked for my identity. I've revealed my identity to you. So therefore, what you are supposed to do, you should do it now before this vehicle moves." The officer said, "What am I supposed to be doing?" He said, "Okay, if you do not know what you are supposed to be doing, I will tell you for the sake of the passengers so that I will not delay them." He said, "Don't you know that etiquette requires that you should salute?" He said, "I've already said you, thank you, sir, go." He said, "No, that is not what you're taught. You should salute." And the egoistic corporal, military officer refused. So the lieutenant colonel captain stepped down out of the vehicle and he said, "Who is the head of this place?" And the officer that was sitting near him did not want to put him in trouble. He said, "No, the officer is not here." So the colonel said, "Okay, let's go." He entered to the vehicle and went to the next beat. And he asked for the head of the whole of the unit of that road. And then when they revealed him, they said, "Okay, who is in charge of that beat?" To cut the long story short, we had to drive back to the same location, and the head of that place was a warrant officer. So the colonel said they should bring him out. And behold, the egoistic officer at that moment realizes his position, and he knelt down with his uniform and started begging, because at that moment it was about to be dealt with in a manner that will not be befitting an officer. So why am I sharing this story? It is interesting because I was reading the purport of this text, and that scenario happened, and I was wondering, seeing how the living entities, the eternal fragmental part and parcel of the Lord, forgets its original position and become covered and chooses the path of sense gratification as a course of life, which is what results in its multifarious confusion. Srila Prabhupada, in the beginning of the purport of the text we are reading, gave us a clue on the purpose of this whole creation. In the text, the demigods were praying to the Supreme Personality of Godhead They were seeking for guidance, for direction on how to act. And later in the purport, Srila Prabhupada explained the reason why they could do that. They were able to do that because they were a better prisoner. A gross conditioned soul. Umaivam so jivalu ke jivabu ta sanatana. Manachaktan triyani prakiti stani kaushati. The living entity engaged in the material body loses its purity, as Prabhupada explained it in the purport, and he forgets its original position of a minute fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, he loses the purpose of his existence, and he starts assuming that everything is meant for his enjoyment, and he walks throughout his whole existence trying to gratify the senses. As Srila Prabhupada explained here in the purport, there is nothing wrong about trying to enjoy, because the Lord originally created the material world. One of the purpose or the external purpose for creating the material universe is to give the living entity the opportunity to try. The word used there is to try to gratify his senses, which is impossible, because ultimately the primary purpose of the whole of the existence of the whole of the creation is to gratify the senses of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Some few years back, I was teaching in the university, and a student asked me something very close to this subject matter we're discussing. After speaking for about an hour, and I opened up for question and answer, the young man asked a question. He said, so ultimately, what is the purpose of life? I said, do you want to know the original purpose or the secondary purpose? He said there must be only one purpose, and that only one purpose is what I want to understand. So I told him that the ultimate purpose of the living entity's existence is to glorify the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And as a Christian, he quoted a Bible verse and explained that what this world is created for us to enjoy. And I explained that is a secondary purpose, and that is what Srila Prabhupada is revealing in the purport of this text. In the material world, everything is in dualities, because the material energy, as explained in the purport, there are three energies. The Lord is manifested in three energies: the superior or internal energy, external or the marginal energy, and then the other various, the marginal energy, the living entity, the external, the internal, and the marginal. And the living entities, being a marginal living entity, has the nature, the capacity to be able to be in or there, here or there. So by virtue of that, sometimes it can be here, sometimes it could be here. And as Srila Prabhupada revealed in the purport, because the living entity is endowed with these infinitesimal tendencies, capacity to be able to make a choice. And like that of police military officer I started the narration with, the tendency to misuse the position that is given to us is what keeps us in a suffering situation, just like that military gentleman find himself in a mess. Because he was given the position to check other people. Then he loses his consciousness as a result of the influence of the covering. Because of his minute nature, because of his minuteness, he forgot his original position. He becomes covered, and he loses the original purpose for which he was supposed to be standing by the side of the road. And in just a few minutes, he found himself in a very, very unpalatable situation. It's the same thing with the living entity in the material world. The living entity in the material world is eternally fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And in chapter 18 of the Bhagavad Gita, text number 58, Machita Sarva Dugani, Srila Prabhupada explained in the purport of that verse that the living entities in the material world does not know what is to be done or what is not to be done. Why? Why is this like that? Because the nature of the living entity is that the moment it takes this material body, is invested with the 4 defects of conditioned life. The moment it enters into this manifestation, although the living entity is pure by nature, the moment it enters into this environment, is captured by the 4 manifestations of the conditional life, which is described as Brahma, Pramada, Vipralipsa, and Kanapatava, or the tendencies to make mistake, to be illusion, the tendencies to cheat, and the is as and imperfect senses. Just like energy in its true nature is colorless. It has no color. But the moment it's covered, we see it as blue, yellow, green, white light. But in the reality, power or net energy has no color of its own. So the living entity, due to this conditional life of 4 defects of tendencies of imperfect senses, and due to the imperfect senses that it commits mistakes, due to illusion, and the tendency to want to cheat is there. So in one of his purposes, Srila Prabhupada mentioned that the whole problem of the material world is as a result of the fact that the living entities, forgetting its original position, tries to be what he is not. And in this way, he falls into a very, very difficult situation in material life. So in the purpose, Srila Prabhupada is explaining that the purpose behind the whole of the material creation is to ultimately give glorification to the senses of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But because the living entity, because of its minute nature, it falls down and is described as nature bodies or eternally conditioned living entities. And that position is to give him the opportunity to improve. And Srila Prabhupada explained that for those who take advantage of this transcendental process of Krishna consciousness, knowledge, or transcendental knowledge, living entity, although captured in the 4 defects of human existence, can regain its original pure level of consciousness, where it can see things as they are. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the first canto, chapter 2, and the text number 10 to 12, Shukadev Goswami advised that life's desire should never be directed towards sense gratification. But that is only meant for those who are in pure consciousness, those who have become rectified by the process of devotion and service. Srila Srila Goswami said that one should desire only a healthy life or self-preservation, because the human life is meant for inquiry, and this is interesting. In the material world, everything is based on dualities. And these dualities of life is manifested in 6 directions. Those who are in the conditional state of life generally has the tendency to see 3 directions. They could see their front. They're always focusing on the future, a better future. They want to see what is in their front. They can only see what is in their front, what they have in their right or left side. But an intelligent person, a person who is in knowledge, he does not approach life in that manner. It goes inwardly. First and foremost, it goes back inwardly and try to understand his original position. So the human life, the human existence is meant for this type of inquiry, says Srila Sukad Goswami. This inquiry about the absolute truth is the original constitutional nature or the duty of the living entities in the material world. And Sukadev Goswami says that there should not be anything else that should be the goal of one's endeavor in life. So in the purport of the text, Srila Prabhupada explained that those who have captured this essence of human life, who take advantage of this, they engage in auspicious activities, and such persons are promoted. And Srila Prabhupada is describing in that second paragraph the position of the demigod. Although they are also conditioned so, but because they've come to the realization of the purpose behind the creation. And Prabhupada gave a very wonderful example that just like in a prison house, some older prisoners who after so many years of staying in the prison encagement, they sometimes become reformed, and the prison masters give them responsibility to manage other prisoners. So the demigods are just same like that. So therefore, this is why it is condemned for one to worship the demigods. Because if one understands the position, true position of the living, his position and the position of the demigods, he understands, he comes to this consciousness of the demigods, taking shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But the Lord is so magnanimous. The Lord does not impose on anyone. So Srila Prabhupada quoted in the purport, Bhagavad Gita 15:15, Mata Smriti Gyanam Apo Anam Cha, that the Lord, according to the choices that the divine entity decides to make, He gives him the opportunity to remember Him, to forget Him, or to have the knowledge of Him. It is all based on the choices that the individual living entities make. And in Nishita Charitamrita, there is a beautiful verse, which is from the Nectar of Devotion, quoted by in the Nishita Charitamrita, Madhya Lila 17:136. Ata Sri Krishna Namadi na bave griyam indriye. Seva mukehi jiva da swayam eva surati ada. That the material senses cannot appreciate Krishna's holy name, form, qualities, and pastime. Only when a conditioned soul is awakened to the level of Krishna consciousness and renders service by using his tongue to chanting the holy name of the Lord can it taste the remnants of the Lord. Then he can become purified. Then he knows the purpose, as it is stated in the verse we're saying, the original purpose of the Lord's creation, which is to serve the senses, to please the senses of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Srila Prabhupada said, one can desire to be in any position in the material world, but one should know the purpose for which the work is meant for. And what is the purpose? The purpose is to engage in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There are several stories in the scriptures that points to this direction of the ultimate purpose. The living entity in the material world are always constantly seeking to be happy. They want to be peaceful. They want to be in a state of happiness. But Lord Krishna told Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita chapter 2, text number 66, pointing to the same formula for becoming peaceful. What is that? Nasti buddhi ayuktasya na chayuktasya bhavana na chabaya santihi asantasya kuta sukham One who is not connected with the Supreme in Krishna consciousness can have neither transcendental intelligence nor a steady mind, without which there is no possibility of peace. And how can there be any happiness without peace? So the demigods here, they understand this very purpose. And so therefore, they take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And they pray to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is said that when one understands his original position, which is what Arjuna demonstrated in his conversation with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, in the Bhagavad Gita. When one understands his original position, then he surrenders. He takes shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And by taking such shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by engaging in work, by engaging in activities, ultimately for only the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then one can attain the conclusion of what Srila Prabhupada shared in the purport of this verse that we're reading. And Prabhupada quoted a very beautiful verse, same chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita, text number 41, where it says, Vyava sayatmi ka bodhi, eka kuru nandana, pausaka I anantascha buddhayo vyava sayinam. And that verse is talking about one who is resolute. And who are those persons who are resolute? Those who are on the path of Krishna consciousness. Just like the demigods are demonstrating in this test, they understand the ultimate purpose. Although their endeavor was to assist the Lord in creation, but they know that ultimately, to achieve this, the only succor is to take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Srila Prabhupada, interestingly, quoted this verse of one who is intelligent. And what is that intelligence? Resolute in meditation on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which is the demigod is teaching here. And Srila Prabhupada, in the purport of that verse he quoted, in the second paragraph of that text, Srila Prabhupada emphasized what resolute purposes. Resolute purpose can be attained. And Srila Prabhupada said that the resolute purpose of a person in Krishna consciousness is based on knowledge. And Prabhupada paraphrased another text of Bhagavad Gita. Sa Mahatma Sudrulabha. After many years, after many lives, after many decades of existence, from one body to another body, from one planet to another, when one becomes equipped with proper knowledge, then one can become resolute, like the demigods prayed here, and meditate on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so therefore it is said that the beginning of human life starts with knowledge. But that knowledge is not possible without the double mercy of Guru and Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada mentioned in the purport that the demigods, the spiritual master, is the representative of all of the demigods. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada mentioned that the demigods are the representative of all of the demigods. And service in Krishna consciousness, however, best practice under the able guidance of the spiritual master, who is a bona fide representative of Krishna, who knows the nature of the student and who can guide him to act in Krishna consciousness. So therefore, as such, to be well-versed in Krishna consciousness, one has to act firmly and obey the representative of Krishna, and one should accept the instructions of the bona fide spiritual master as one's mission in life. That is the goal of an intelligent person. And how do one attain that? By this process of chanting the holy name of the Lord. With one's own mouth. As quoted earlier on. Although the material senses is what has bound the living entity into this material world, but with the use of the same senses in rendering service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then one can develop affinity, love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and it can attain the ultimate position of Krishna consciousness. So Krishna consciousness is possible even in this one lifetime, but one has to understand the ultimate purpose of the Lord as explained in this verse. And that is to understand that ultimately, the ultimate purpose is to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So a devotee in Krishna consciousness, he understands this basic transcendental knowledge. And so therefore, he constantly engages himself in the process of devotion and service. And such a devotee are resolute in purpose, as explained by Srila Prabhupada. Whatever he does, whatever he says, whatever he eats, whatever relationship he has, he connects it in Krishna consciousness. And in this way, whether in this earthly planet or heavenly planet or any planet, he is constantly connected to the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his original consciousness. Having taken shelter of the bona fide representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is the essence of the verse that we're reading today. That ultimately, once you understand that every purpose is fulfilled when one comes to this ultimate purpose behind every creation of the Lord, which is to gratify the senses of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And when one comes to this level of understanding and realization, his activities is described as Krishna consciousness. And such a person in Krishna consciousness has no worries about his duties of life. Is such a person, he can freely act in any capacity because he knows the purpose behind everything. And his activities are considered and described as auspicious because they are in connection with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that is the beauty of Krishna consciousness. And the Srila Sukadev Goswami mentioned that in earlier part of the Srimad Bhagavatam, that akama sarva kama uva muksha kama udaradi tifrina bhakti yojana yaditam purusham param, that whatever it is that one desires, you understand that ultimately the ultimate desire should be geared towards pleasing the senses of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And such person who have attained that level of realization is considered to be a successful living entity. Even while he's living in this material world, he's already in Goloka Vrindavan. And that is why Srila Prabhupada ended the purport by giving this beautiful verse that for those who are resolute, who are this part of resolute, their aim is only simply one. The intelligence of those irresolute persons are so many divided. They are so much in so many troubles. Why? Because they've not understand this one simple reality of truth. So I'll stop here and give room for discussions on the subject of today's class. Thank you very much for giving the opportunity. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Salika Prabhu, for sharing this wisdom with us. And dear devotees, if anyone may have questions, comments, realizations you may want to ask or share, please indicate by using the hand emoji or your physical hand, and you'll be asked to unmute to ask your question or share your reflections. If I may put the verse back on the screen, it's very interesting what the demigods are saying. If the demigods, okay, I will wait for your explanation to this, but I'm not sure whether the demigods really know what they're talking about. Sorry to say that, because I'm nobody to say that to the demigods. But the demigods are saying that, "O Supreme Self, please give us who are created in the beginning from the Mahatattva, total cosmic energy." So the demigods, are they hereby implying that their source is the Mahatattva and not from Krishna?
Very beautiful question. Very beautiful question. The Mahatattva is the origin of all living entities. Krishna is ultimately Aham Sarvasya Prabhava Mata Sarva Pravatate Iti Mato Bhajantemam Buddha Bhava Samanvita. Krishna is the source of everything. But in the process of manifesting himself into different various manifestations, there are processes. When Krishna manifests himself into Balaram, the first expansion, then into the four quadruple expansions, and into Mahatattva, he manifests the 24, what we can describe as ingredients of creation. The 24 elements of creation, which by extension is the source of all other creations. So the demigods here in this verse are referring to that, because the original Brahma, it is said that there are several Brahmas. Actually, we know the Brahma who was born from the lotus, from the navel of the Vishnu. But there are many Brahmas. And the source of all of these creations are coming from the Mahavishnu, who is the origin of the 24 elements of creation. So it's just like when a child says, "My mother gave birth to me." I'm just using a very elementary, very graphic example. But without the father, the mother cannot give birth to the child. Because Krishna is the seed-giving father, but material energy is the birthplace of the living entity. So it is correct to say that material energy gives birth to the living entity. But when one goes deeper, you can understand that material energy is not on its own. And that is why Krishna explains that Devi Esa Gunamayi, Maya Duratya, Mam Evaya Papadiante, my Etam Tarantite, that the material energy is my divine energy. So the Mahatattva is not on its own. The Mahatattva has its origin. Ultimately, when you trace back to Krishna. So the statement of the demigods are not wrong, but in the context in which they are using it, they are referring to when we see that in the earlier part of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and in this very canto, Narada Muni was asking his father, what is your source? Because before that question, Brahma, Narada Muni assumed that Lord Brahma is the creator of everything. He's the father of everybody. But when he asked Brahmaji explained to him, yes, those who are less in knowledge, whose knowledge are limited, can assume me to be the origin of everything. And they are right, because I'm the origin of all they can see. But behind me is another origin, which is beyond this origin, and that is Krishna. So the demigods are correct in their assertion that they are created. Of course, the living entities are not created, but their existence, the manifestation of the what we can relate with as material existence, is coming from the 24 elements of creation, which is coming from the Mahatattva. So their assertions are correct in the context in which they are explaining it. But ultimately, it is understood that Krishna is the origin of everything. That is true. But in the context in which they are speaking from the context of where they know. And that is why Prabhupada, when he quoted that conclusion of this verse we're reading, in that verse itself, Prabhupada quoted Bahunam Jamanam Ante Genavam Mam Prapadyante Vasudeva Savamiti Sam Atma Sudu Alaba. That after many years of cultivation of knowledge, so knowledge has a gradation. The material scientists who are trying very strongly to create so many succor for the living entity's existence, comfort in this existence, they are in knowledge, but their knowledge is limited to their senses, and their senses has its own origin. So therefore, there are origins ahead of origins. And when one ultimately search those origins, from one origin to another origin, from one origin to another origin, then one comes to Krishna. And that is what Krishna told. Before Krishna told Arjuna in chapter 10 of Bhagavad Gita, he said that in this, he has told Arjuna of the sun, of that which gives light, I'm the sun, I'm the taste in water. He has given so many sources to explain origin to Arjuna. But ultimately, when it comes to the 10th chapter, he said, I'm the source of everything. Everything is emanating from me. So light and heat is coming from the sun, but the sun is not on its own. The sun also has its origin. So the level of origin, and that is why it is said that on the material consciousness, where one knowledge ends, another one begins. And because Krishna is what? Unlimited. That is why it is difficult to find the origin of Krishna, because Krishna has no beginning. So the moment there is a beginning, then that is not God. Because he who has no origin, and that is why Lord Brahma, after realization, he said, Ishwara Paraman Krishna Sakchidananda Vigra Anadi Adi, the origin of all origin, who has no origin himself. So the demigods are correct in their assertion to say that they are created from the Mahatattva, because Mahatattva is the origin of all manifestations. But for that, Vasudeva, one of the 4 quadruple expansions of Krishna, as it comes down in different levels of creation, before it comes to that, it's a systematic process of creation. Someone can say that, another gross example, one can say that popcorn is made from corn. And that is true. But when you go behind that, you see that there is an existence before that existence. And that is what the demigods are saying in this verse.
Well, Hare Krishna, I have a follow-up question, but I'll let Madhava Prabhu go. Madhava Prabhu, please, you may unmute. This is a very interesting statement the demigods are making, and your explanation and a description also kind of muddies the water more for more clarification. But Madhava Prabhu, please, you may unmute.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yeah, Madhavan
All
Prabhuji.
grace, all grace. All grace unto your little feet. All grace is Prabhupada.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you very much for giving us this class, for taking so much trouble, and how you have been supporting this platform. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Prabhu.
So if you are hearing me clearly, should
Yes,
I
I
off my video?
No, I can hear
Okay.
you clearly.
So,
Good. We
okay,
can
thank
hear
you very much. Okay. So, according to the past question,
Mm.
I just want to chip in my own idea also,
Mhm.
if I'm permitted.
Please go ahead.
Yes. So when we look at the text, even the previous text, we could see how the demigods, they are pleading to Krishna that he should help them, because they acknowledge their weakness. And I think that's why they mention Mahatattva, that's the external energy of the Supreme Lord. And once, which consists of the most of material nature. So they are acknowledging their own weak point, So because of that, they are begging Krishna that he should give them, he should show them the direction on how to act. And then they are also begging for perfect knowledge and potency also. They acknowledge their inebriety being in within the external energy. So just like the example you gave us in the beginning of the lecture, how we have an officer, how he deviated from his duty, the main purpose was posted there. So I think that is what demigods are trying to avoid, because they are in the material dimension and they know that they are prone to make mistakes or to act otherwise. And from the purpose, it was explained that the Lord created this material world and impregnates the material energy with the living entity who will act in the material world. They said the plan is to give the conditions so whoso desire a chance to enjoy self-gratification. That's the purpose of this material manifestation. But Prabhupada also explained that there's another plan behind the creation to help the living entity realize that they are created for the transcendental sense gratification of the Lord and not for their individual sense gratification. So the demigods, being a higher being, they are more conscious of this weak point, that they are under the influence of the external energy of the Supreme Lord. So they need empowerment from the Lord so that they can act in the appropriate way. And Hare Krishna, that's my take.
Yeah, thank you very much for the contribution, Prabhuji. You're very right. And just to further clarify on that subject, Sade Prabhu, if you can go back to the text number 27 and 28 of this same chapter, this question you ask is actually being already answered there. What I was trying to explain, but just to give a reference to it, how Mahatattva is coming from where the beginning of Mahatattva, and now Mahatattva is the origin of the creation of other living entities. So maybe you can share that on the screen, so for others, for reference.
Is it 3-5?
27 downward. Actually, it starts from 23, but let's read 27, 27 and 28 of this same chapter.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, therefore, influenced by the interactions of eternal time, the supreme sum total of matter, called the Mahatattva, became manifested. And in this Mahatattva, the unalloyed goodness, the Supreme Lord, sowed the seed of universal manifestation out of his own body. Then go to the next verse. Then he said that thereafter, this Mahatattva differentiated itself into many different forms as a reservoir of the future entities. See that statement. Therefore, thereafter, the Mahatattva differentiated itself into many different forms as a reservoir of the future entities. The Mahatattva is chiefly in the mode of ignorance, and it generates the false ego. It is a plenary expansion of the personality of Godhead with full consciousness of creative principles and time for fructification. So when you go down, so all this has been explained in the beginning chapter. Actually, when you want to understand this, when you go back from text 21, 22, 23 to 27, before the 27, and he continues to explain. So how Mahatattva is the source of all other creations.
Yes, I accept that Mahatattva is the source, just as there's a difference in the source. In the sense that my understanding is that, just like you were saying, if somebody asked me, who is my source? I'll say it's my father and mother. My father and mother gave birth to me. And what the demigods are saying, my understanding to what they are saying is that they are just speaking like I am speaking, that my father and mother gave birth to me. But I also understand that my father and mother are not the source of me.
Exactly.
No, I came from somewhere, entered into grains, and then my father ate the grains, and I turned to semen, and then my father gave it to my mother, and I got fertilized. I mean, the body got fertilized for the soul to inhibit in, and then I was popped out.
Mm-hmm.
So I can say that my parents are my source, but that does not mean that they actually are the source of me. I came from somewhere. So if the demigods mean that, okay, Mahatattva made them manifest, but their source is Krishna, then that is understandable to me. But if they say, and if I understood your description very well, it seems to me that you were also saying that the Mahatattva came from Krishna, and then the 11 entities came from the Mahatattva. In other words, the Mahatattva is the generator of the 11 entities, but when we went back and we read the verses you indicated, that is not what it indicates. It's just like if we do genealogy, I can say that, I come from this family, which is like thousands of years ago. That means that even though I belong to that line, but I wasn't there in 1,000 years when those main ancestors were there. I was also there. But in the case of my understanding between the 11 entities and Krishna, if we link back to Krishna, that means that we were there with Krishna. That's my understanding. And if that is my understanding, that is why I found it a bit unclear what the demigods were saying and what that could possibly mean.
Okay, thank you very much, Sadi Prabhu. Let me start from this point to respond to your question. In the first place, put at the back of your mind the way Srila Prabhupada described the demigod. Prabhupada used the analogy of a prisoner and a reformed prisoner. Both of them are prisoners, and their perception, their understanding, and even from external perception is that they are all prisoners. And based on the position of each and every one perceives certain subjects according to that level of realization. So when we're talking about the demigod, we're not talking about a Mahabhagavat who is, we're not talking of Lord Brahma here. We're not talking of Brahma who, after realization, realized the original position of Krishna. So the Prabhupada gave them a position in this purport. He explains that there are also conditions. So in summary, Prabhupada is saying there are also conditions. So it's just that they have a better reformed situation. Their consciousness is purified to a certain extent. So therefore, they are given the position to be a manager of all others who are grossly conditioned. And then this question about the origin of the soul, most times when we want to talk about the origin itself, when we look at what Krishna told Arjuna in chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita, it is very obvious. The position, na jayate, na mriyate, va kadasin. For the soul, there is neither birth nor death at any time. He has not come into being. It does not come into being and will not come into being. He is unborn. He is eternal. He is ever existing and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain. When we are talking about the living entity is not born. And that was why I referenced that word used, creation. The living entity was never created. The living entity is as old as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because it's ever existing. It has no beginning. It has no end. But its existence in this space of time calculation, because when you look at that same reference I gave you, and that's why I said if you want to understand better, you go back a little bit. When you go back a little bit, you see the manifestation of time. And all of this situation that we're talking about, my origin, is based on our understanding of time. But time also has its own beginning, because time is a subject of material. Time also is influenced by the modes, 3 modes. So according to the goggle of modes that one is bearing, it sees the time in a particular perception. So when we're talking about the origin from our own conditional perception, then we can be looking at origin. But the origin of the soul originally is that it has no origin. The living entity has no origin because it's originally part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who has no origin, but he manifested at a point in the manifestation of Krishna. And when you go back a little bit, let us go back. Can you share that verse, that verses again? Let's go back into this same chapter. Let's go back to, let's say, like 2021, like I said before. Yeah, 20, yes, let's start from here. So Mandava Muni was, I know that you are now Vidura due to the causing of Mandavya Muni, and that formerly you are King Yamaraj, that great controller of living entities after their death. You were begotten by Savyavati's sons, Vyasadeva. So it's giving him history now. Let's go to the next verse. Then, your good self is one of the eternal associates of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, for whose sake the Lord, while going back to his abode, left instructions with him. Go down. Then he went further. He said, I shall therefore describe to you the pastimes by which this personality of Godhead extends its transcendental potency for the creation, maintenance, and dissolution of the cosmic world as they occur one after another. So this is where it starts, the explanation. Now let's go to 23. Then it says, the personality of God, the master of all living entities, existed prior to the creation as one without a second. It is by his will only that creation is made possible. And again, everything merges in him. The supreme self is symptomized by different names. Let's go. It's describing. We have read the purport, so we're not going to the purport. Purport gives an extensive elaboration. Then he said, the Lord, the undisputed proprietor of everything, which is similar to verse 10:8. The Lord, the undisputed proprietor of everything, was the only seer. The cosmic manifestation was not present at that time. The Matatua that we're talking was not present at that time. And thus it felt imperfect without explaining and separated parts and parcel. The materiality was dormant, whereas the internal potency was manifested. Go. Then in 25, he says that the Lord is the seer, and the external energy, which is seen, work as both cause and effect in the cosmic manifestation. And I'm using Matatua here for references. O greatly fortunate Vidura, this external energy is known as Maya or illusion, and through our agency only in the entire material manifestation made possible. This is very key verse. All of these discussions we are having started from here. From this illusory energy of the Lord, to step down, just like in electricity, they say sometimes from the power source, the power is stepped down to the life wire cable. From there, is stepped down into transformer and then stepped down into the houses. So here, the Lord is talking about all of this. Our understanding about the origin is beginning from this point on, when the Maya or the illusion through the agency only is the entire manifestation. All of the material manifestation we're talking about, they manifest based on the illusory energy of the Lord. Then let's go to 26. Then we'll now go to the verse I quoted before. Then the Lord says here, and the text says here that the supreme living entity being in his feature as the transcendental Purusha incarnation, who is the Lord's plenary expansion, impregnates the material nature of three modes, and thus by the influence of eternal time, the living entities appear. Take note of that word used there. And thus by influence of eternal time, the living entities appear. So the living entities has been existing. Their origin is the Lord, but at that point, they manifested. And because they manifest at that point, someone might say, oh, that is the beginning, that's the origin of the living entity. But that is not the origin when you actually go to the absolute origin of the living entity. The living entity is origin, or absolute origin, does not start at this point. It's the living entity has been existing. But at this point, it manifests. At this point. And that is the origin.
Thank you for engaging us in this wonderful going back to reading what we already read, retrospection. But I was tempted to ask you this question because I had heard from your humble self a couple times before that you do not also accept that the loving entity's original source is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So I'm taking it from you today that from today onwards, you accept that the source of the giver is Krishna.
Yeah, you see, according to the platform at which you speak, at the context, certain level of assertion is made. But the reality is that just like the professor may know, but when he gets into elementary class, he doesn't exhibit his erudite knowledge of a subject matter at that level. He speaks according to the level of the context in which he was speaking. I was asked to speak in one event just about a week and a half ago. And I was going to, I prepared a very nice paper for presentation. It was, the title of the topic they gave me was Peace in Pieces, a fractured Nigeria, So when I went into that place, so my first question when and I had only 20 minutes. So I was looking, how do I address it? I don't even know. It's not even a physical, if it was a live, face-to-face, a virtual speech. So I wanted to know what is the concept of those who I'm going to be speaking with. So when I got there, the first thing I said was that I said, I would like everyone to please help me to be able to serve you better. Put in the chat box what peace constitutes to you. What at the back of your mind when you say peace? And then when they started typing, I was just full of laughter. And when I started to speak, I said, the first thing that came out of my mouth was that I said, peace is not a commodity that you can buy or purchase. Peace is not something that is external that you need to take in. Peace is something that is within that needs to be uncovered because it's already existing. And I started from there because I could see that the understanding when they said peace is in pieces. And I references the Bible, the Quran. The Quran clearly states that peace actually signifies the supreme being. That if there's any word meaning to the word peace, peace means God. That is what the Quran says. And I referenced that verse. I quoted that verse. I said, so can God be in pieces? Yes and no. Because if God was not in pieces, I would not be existing because God decided to pieces himself. He manifested, he multiplied himself into many pieces. And I said, but when we are speaking, we don't give people, when you talk about subject about peace, in Krishna consciousness, we don't talk of peace in the context of what generally people will look at as peace. Because when we say peace, war situation is not a peaceful situation, but the greatest peaceful manifestation on this earth was as a result of a war that happened in the battlefield of Kurukshetra. The Bhagavad was speaking on that place, and the greatest subject matter of peace was spoken at that place. So how can war become a base for pieces? So you cannot pieces. Peace cannot be in pieces. What can be in pieces is our different level of consciousness. Our different level of consciousness are in pieces. So therefore, we see peace as in pieces, but peace can never be in pieces. Peace is an wholesome personality, the supreme personality of Godhead. But our consciousness, our perception of that peace is divided, is in pieces. So therefore, we see pieces. So yes, you are right, Sahadev Prabhu. At some point, I pitched here when it comes to this subject because there are certain level of moment when you speak. You only speak to the context at which the audience, and you see, that is what we learned from Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada will say, we are not Hindus. But in some other places, Prabhupada will say, we are Hindu organization. So it is based on the concept of, or the context in which the conversation is going on. I'm sorry if I bring that confusion.
No, thank you. I think I'm very satisfied with your answer, and we're especially going back. It's quite clear from the texts which originally was coming from Maitreya. He was with the Lord, and therefore he understood what the Lord imparted to Uddhava. So he was there. So thank you. Shri Hari Chakra Prabhu, please you may unmute.
Okay. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Salika Prabhu,
Thank you so much
for all this in-depth explanation. But my question is, during your deliberation, you kept saying that the Lord has three energies, and that is supported by Scripture. Yes, the same Scripture explains where or how these three energies are manifested. Now, when they said the external energy of the Lord manifests the material creation, then the internal energy of the Lord is the manifestation of the spiritual existence. So my question is, the marginal energy that we talk, does it have a geographical location? Because we know we have the spiritual world, we have the material world. Is there a third world where the marginal energy lives? And if there is a what do we call it, a geographical location, does that mean that the marginal energies, they can I mean, are they capable of living? I don't even know how to ask my question. Are you getting me? External energy is the material creation. Internal energy is the spiritual manifestation. So where is the marginal energy? Where location is the
Where is this existence? Thank you very much. I think I understand where you're coming from, and I'll try to give an explanation to it. The living entities, which are described as the marginal energy of the Lord, are called sarvagata. And sarvagata means destination or location or geographical location, as you're trying to. Sarva means everywhere. The living entity, who as a marginal living entity, by their constitutional position, can be in the spiritual world and they can be in the material world. That is why they are called marginal. They can exist in the spiritual realm and they can exist they can live everywhere. Now, when we talk about the geographical location or the home of the living entity has no particular geographical location. It is based on its mindset or consciousness of desires that if it is made to appear and exist in a particular way, based on its consciousness or its conscious desires, is put into a particular environment for existence. But the living entity is in the chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita. In chapter 2 on the Bhagavad Gita, the word sarvagata is used. Achedio yam adalio yam. Akledio sosia evaschaha. Nitya sarvagata stanam. Achalo yam sanatana. The individual soul is unbreakable and insoluble and can be neither born nor dry. Is everlasting, is all-pervading. That's the word I wanted to use. Because that's the word proper transmitted as all-pervading. Sarvagata is all-pervading, unchangeable, immovable, and eternally the same. So this is how Prabhupada described the soul in the Bhagavad Gita chapter 2, text number 24. So the living entity is Sarvagata, is all-pervading because the Lord is all-pervading, because he is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. Just like Prabhupada will give example of gold is gold, irrespective of wherever it finds, whether it is a minute gold or gold mine or gold cake or gold whatever. Gold is gold. So the living entity is also of the nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Same quality, but in quantity is different. That is the only difference between him and the Supreme Being. So therefore, because the Lord is all-pervading, he himself, the soul, is all-pervading. And because it's all-pervading, like the Lord, it can exist anywhere. It can exist in the material realm. It can exist in the spiritual realm. It can exist in the nether world, anywhere. Within the existence of the Lord, it can exist anywhere because that is its nature. Its nature is that it can exist in any geographical location or environment, as we use the word. So that is the nature of the living entity or the marginal living entity. Is of the same quality as the superior or internal energy. It can exist anywhere and everywhere. And that is why you see that the living entities can live inside the fire. The fire is burning. Me and you, because of the kind of body we have, may not be able to exist there. But the living entity can exist in that realm. There are entities that live inside fire, and the living entity, there are living entities that stay in the Surya Loka, or the sun planet. The sun, millions of miles here, we feel the burning. So what to talk of those who live in that sun planet itself? So because of the nature of the living entity is Sarvagata, they can live anywhere. It's all pervading. I hope it helps.
Well, Hare Krishna, thank you. I hope and I believe our Chakra Prabhu is satisfied. And dear devotees, does anyone else have something to share or ask? Well, His Grace Salika Prabhu, as always, thank you so much for sharing this depth of wisdom with us today. And our gratitude to the demigods for sharing their wisdom with us.
Exactly.
I read somewhere where Sri Prabhupada says these demigods, they are far more advanced than us, earthly human beings. And sometimes they are able to see Krishna. And those who continue to serve Krishna, they can go back to Vaikuntha. Those who do not serve Krishna, they fall down. So, no one is safe if we do not surrender to Krishna. And if the demigods are not safe, they want to speak of us. So, we pray that we can always remember Krishna and serve Krishna and his devotees. So, dear devotees, we may bring this to a final closure. Except Salika Prabhu, you have some concluding words, concluding statements?
Well, I will just summarize again with what I ended the class with. In the material world, the eternal companion of the living entity is his desires. And there is no harm in desiring. But let us follow the advice of like Sukadev Goswami. Akarama Sava Kamova. Mukcha Kama Udaradi. Tivrina Bhakti Yojin. Yajita Purisham Param. Yes, let us desire anything and everything. But let us be intelligent. And that intelligence, like Sukadev Goswami says, that we should desire that in Krishna consciousness. Whether we want to get married or not get married, whether we want to eat or do not want to eat, whatever we want to do, let us do it as a service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And in that way, our position will be saved. And when we live here will be happy. When we live here, we'll be happier. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Well, thank you so much. I think ending on Hari Chakra Prabhu's question, it seems it's clear to us today that the Tataksha energy is not a geographical location.
Yeah.
It is consciousness, it is mood, it's attitude. So we're going to humbly request all the devotees to kindly unmute, and we all chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra to express our appreciation to our revered speaker, our revered host, His Grace Salika Prabhu. Jai. Hare
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
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 Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama,
Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
Vancha Patitanam Pavachnebhyo Vaishnavim. Srimad Bhagavatam class ki.
Yeah.
Jai Gora Piminante.